All right, CNT120, Chap4Lab. We are down to Part 7 and Part 8. Part 7 and 8, we're going to look at two commands that we're going to add to our plate. We've used ping before, we've used ipconfig before, but we're going to add two more commands to our plate, Netstat and Traceroute. So Netstat allows us to see any active or open TCP connections that we might have on a station. So on my desktop, I might have some browser ports or browser things open to websites, and I'm going to see some ports. I might have some applications running, and I might see some ports. But if I'm looking at things from a security security direction, if you will, if I'm on something like a server and I would run Netstat, I'd look for any application ports that are open that are supposed to be open, but then I'd look at the other ports and go, is there anything in here that I don't know? And I would research, and if it's an application that's legit that we're running, awesome, but if it's a port that I'm like, I don't know what this is, maybe this is actually a port that got turned on through an update, maybe it's actually a security vulnerability that I want to disable, and I would do some homework on. So Netstat allows me to see that kind of information. So let's look at our Harrisburg PC. We haven't really used this for anything yet in this lab. So I'm going to go over here to the ipconfig part first. And I'm just going to make sure it has an IP on the network, which it does. If it does not, for some reason, click on static, wait a couple seconds, click on dynamic again, and it should pick up an IP and be usable on the network. Now that I have that, I'm going to open my command prompt, and I'm going to issue the netstat command. And as I run this, I see there's no active connections. Well, that actually kind of makes sense because this computer hasn't done anything in the network yet. So let's generate some traffic to do that, and then we will come back and look at our netstat results. So I'm going to open the browser, and then I'm going to open up the web page over here. You can do a little browser, and I'm going to just kind of open that up, www.cnt.org, and then I'm going to refresh that page a couple times so it keeps generating a new connection to open the website. You can do it. You can do it. I know you can. You can do it. So there I have an open connection, but once that connection, I've loaded the web page, it probably closed down. So I'm going to refresh this a handful of times, maybe like 8 or 10 times. And then I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go back to my command prompt, and I'm going to issue the netstat command while there's hopefully a couple of open connections here, and there are. So here's my browser. Each time I requested the web page, it's hitting the server at port 80. So my browser, basically new tab, if you will, keeps loading the web page and requests it. But every time I'm hitting the server at port 80, you're seeing the actual socket address there, the IP address and port 80 for HTTP. And you see it's established and all these are closing out. So this would be a way to see any active connections that you have. Now in this case it's all to the web server, but in real life I would see different port numbers here and going to different IPs and different port numbers here. And you would do some research on are these all looking legit, or all these applications, these port numbers looking legit. If I'm on a server, then I would research further to know, should that be open, or is that something that got enabled by an update and it should not be open. So we're going to copy this result here. And again, if you have a couple less than mine, not a big problem. We're just looking for at least a couple active connections. We'll come over here to our lab and we'll put in here part 7. And we're going to put netstat. And I'm going to plug that in and I'm going to save that. So there's our netstat command. Well, now let's take a look at, I will close this out for a second. Let's now take a look at what we get with Traceroute. So we're going to do a trace between the Harrisburg PC and then over to our Philadelphia PC. So Traceroute allows us to see the path traffic takes from computer to computer, or node, a computer to a server, that type of thing. So we are going to find out the Philadelphia PC address. Here's the Philadelphia PC. And again, we haven't really used this for anything. So you might want to open it up, go to the ipconfig and make sure it has a valid IP, which it does. If need be, click static and then dynamic so it picks one up. So we're going to try to trace to this IP 192.168.30.175. So over here on the Harrisburg PC, let's open up our command prompt again. And we're going to do trace RT 192.168.30.175, I believe it was. Mr. Brown, hold his pointer over here. 170, 30, 175, that top line there. Good. All right. So I'm going to issue that command, And what it should be showing me is the steps it took to get to that destination. 10.1, I should slide this over this way. 10.1 is this router right here. 20.2 is this router. And then 30.175 is this PC. So that pathway makes perfect sense. There really is only one pathway in this case, but that pathway makes sense. Well, how that is useful, it shows me the path it takes, but it also is useful if I have a point later in time where I'm trying to troubleshoot, and if it stops part way, I would know that that is the ballpark I need to start looking at for troubleshooting. What something has gone amiss, something's disconnected, something's shut off, that sort of thing. This will let me know where to start troubleshooting. Very helpful, very valuable to use. So I'm going to highlight this guy and I'm going to copy him. And I'm going to go here to my text file again. This is part 8. So we'll do part 8. And we're going to do trace. I'm going to put in Traceroute. That's the full command. And here's my IP version for trace. And I will paste that in and save that. And now I'm going to do a trace between my laptops with IP version 6. And it'll show us, it gives us pretty much the same info. It's just showing everything IP version 6. So my Philadelphia laptop, in this case, I'm going to open it up, go to ipconfig, and I'm going to highlight and copy this IP address. That way I don't have to type it all in. I'm going to close and go over to my Harrisburg laptop, open the command prompt, and I'm going to issue the trace RT command again, and I will paste this address in, the one I just copied. And this should now take me through my IP6 network. And if I take a look here, FD00A:A:A is this router right here. A::A::B is this router here. And then A::A::C is this laptop here. So there's the pathway it took on the IP version 6 network. And again, same thing. If it gets partway and stops, I would know where I need to start troubleshooting. So I'm going to highlight all this guy and copy this and add that to my text file as well. This is my IP version 6 trace. And I will paste that in and save that. So there is my netstat and trace commands in my lab. I'm going to minimize that a second. When I come back in the next one, we will look at some remote access.